So we really want to thank you for having us be a part of this. We are officially not part of the IT community, but we have certainly felt a big part of the IT community this last year. So the topic today is mindfulness and ambition. Can they coexist? Briefly, just to introduce ourselves, my name is Teri Pipe. I'm ASU's Chief Wellbeing Officer and former Dean of the College of Nursing and Health Innovation. And this is my wonderful colleague, Dr. Nika Gueci, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Mindfulness, Compassion, and Resilience. And so the general topic is work-life balance. How do we integrate? And Nika and I agree that work-life balance is sort of a myth and that it is more about integration and creating presence and focus no matter what we're doing so that we don't feel pulled one way and the next. So with that, the next slide, if you would, Nika. So we're going to talk briefly about mindfulness. I think many of you know what it is, but we always like to clarify what it is, and we'll practice in just a moment. I think people are still coming into the breakout room, so we're just going to allow some transition time while I position us all on the same page about what mindfulness is. So when we think about mindfulness at ASU, we really want to have equity and belonging. Those are really important for us. So the way that we talk about mindfulness reflects that. So knowing that mindfulness is about presence and focus and really being in the present moment, and understanding that you have mindfulness, you have practiced mindfulness, whether you've ever called it that or not, just by in those moments in your life where you have been present and really engaged in living in life. So mindfulness is evidence-based. There's a strong and growing scientific basis behind it. It is something that can be practiced in everyday life. Just like an athlete or a musician practices before they get into the game or into the concert, we advise that you carve out some time to practice mindfulness before you get into the game of life. And that might be 1 or 2 minutes. It might be a 30-minute practice, can be whatever fits into your life. However, if you don't have the time or don't think about creating that space to have a full-on practice, know that you can practice in your day-to-day life. In meetings, in classes, in problem solving, in commuting, we all have opportunities to practice being alive and focused in the moment without being fragmented and frazzled. So mindfulness also really illuminates our own personal value system and belief system so that we can be aligned with who we are and how we want to show up in the world. And in that alignment comes a lot of the stress reduction that is talked about with mindfulness. Because when our attitudes, our beliefs, our behaviors, our values are all going the same direction, that's when we can move with effort and purpose and results. So mindfulness briefly is not just zoning out. So it's much more than just having a clear blank canvas. When you practice mindfulness, thoughts and distractions, feelings will still come in to your awareness. It's a matter of noticing the distraction and pulling your attention back to whatever it is that you're focusing on. It's much more than about breathing, although we use the breath as an anchor often in teaching mindfulness, because the breath is free, it is equitable, everyone has a breath, it's portable, and it's something that unifies all of us in our humanity. And so being able to focus on the breath is a very good teaching tool. It's also very powerful physiologically. So there's a scientific basis for focusing on the breath. But that's not all there is to mindfulness. There's much more to know about it and to practice about it than the breath. In the way that we teach it, mindfulness is not a religion. And so if you have a belief system, mindfulness should not get in the way of that belief system. And if you don't have a belief system, that is not a problem. You can practice either way. You belong, and mindfulness belongs to you. It is part of many different faith traditions and wisdom traditions, cultural traditions. In fact, many indigenous peoples have mindfulness as part of their cultural tradition. Again, whether that is named or not named, that ability to be present and focused in the moment. So, mindfulness is also not about numbing out or turning away from difficult situations. We often see pictures depicting mindfulness of someone sitting on a mountaintop or on the beach, really looking like they're blissed out. And certainly sometimes that can happen. However, it can also open our eyes to things, injustices, difficulties, problems that need to be solved and that we need to bring our full on awareness to. And it can bring us discernment, deciding what do we want to pay attention to, what can we affect, what can we change, and that way we can sort of delve into those issues with energy and focus rather than depleting our energy. And then lastly, it does not mean that you're devoid of action. Sometimes we sit in meditation and mindfulness, and those two are different. Meditation is a type of mindfulness. So often there is this connotation of stillness or non-action, but that could really not be further from the truth. Mindfulness often informs us and motivates us into taking action. And that's where this topic of ambition is so important and relevant, is that, when we are focused and on purpose, we can actually go in the direction of our dreams and our ambitions and what needs to be solved, what problems need to be solved. And so all of that is just a brief primer to get us on the same page about mindfulness. So let's practice right now. And I want you to practice with your eyes open and just in the place where you are, in the position that you are. You don't have to change anything. You can just be how you are. Come as you are. Nothing needs to be changed. And so just noticing in this arriving, where is your body right now? And I really mean feel into your body. Where do you feel your feet and your legs and your hips and your back, your area around your heart and lungs, your arms, your hands? Where is your body? Where is your brain? Is your brain in the next meeting? Is your brain in the fact that you just got here, that you had to do a little here and there before you arrived? And where is your being? Where do you sense the center of your being? And where is that right now? And in this moment of arriving and transition, can we get all of that together so that you feel your mind and your body and your being all in the same place? All aligned, all right here, right now, knowing that you don't have to change a thing. You don't have to be anything else. You don't have to learn anything else. You don't have to create change within you right now. You can just be right here, just as you are. So next slide, Nika.
Sure, thank you, Teri. So mindfulness can be used as a tool for advocacy, transformation, ambition. And one way that we can use mindfulness in action is what we came up with, the expansive model of mindfulness. So this is really an overarching paradigm that the Center for Mindfulness uses to ground our understanding of mindfulness practices here at ASU and beyond. It informs how we consider conversations around mindfulness, illuminates how mindfulness practice naturally shows up in the world, right? Mindfulness is innate. It's something that is in us and inherent in us. And this model also illustrates how we can expand and scale mindfulness throughout these various circles, from self to others to community to broader humanity. So what does this mean for work-life balance, which is the topic that we're talking about today? The question is not really so much as to how to balance, to use a scale to balance two competing priorities, but that we use the practice of mindfulness to really inform our awareness, which hat we wear and when, and how we stay present. As related to jobs and work, mindfulness can be inherent and expansive in both the self and the organization, or it could be totally absent depending on the circumstance. I think in this past year, we've seen many ways that mindfulness is clearly absent from the situation and from society. But when we as individuals act in a non-reactive way, we can impact others and vice versa within the organization, within our families, etc. It's a two-way street. We're impacted by the organization, and the organization is impacted by us. We're all part of a system and therefore have ability to impact that system in work and life, which is really, shouldn't really be too much of a separation, because work informs life and life informs work. So with mindfulness, we can work on expanding out into our organization, out into society, and contracting back into the self. However, one thing to note is that many organizations are embracing mindfulness now. Many employers believe that well-being through learning the skills of mindfulness will lead to greater productivity, less absenteeism, better teamwork, which is all true. But organizations and their leaders cannot put everything on the individual if they're not willing to embrace change themselves. The organization can empower or disempower people. And so because we're part of that context, because we're part of that structure, we are affected by it. And teaching people self-care doesn't mean that we can ignore the structures that bring more equity or bring less equity. When our system is a hustle culture, which many of you might be intimately familiar with, we have to be more assertive in our way of being, and we don't have to choose between peace and productivity. And I'm going to repeat that. We don't have to choose between being peaceful and being productive, no matter what our culture is. We can use mindfulness to approach our awareness of patterns in the workplace. For example, we can tap into the built-in ebbs and flows in academia where we work and use our environment to our benefit. We can link mindfulness to innovation, as real solutions to problems require a presence in what is, an acceptance in what is, rather than the story that we create and the story that we want it to be. So before passing this back to Dr. Pike, I'll ask a question for the chat. How do you manage integration and balance?
Well, this is your ASU Center for Mindfulness, Compassion, and Resilience. It is yours, and we hope that you will visit the center website and sort of stay in touch with what we're doing. We do want to give a big shout out this year to Emily Goldsboro, Video Production Manager, and David Jenks, Tech Producer and Director of Video, who are both part of the Enterprise Marketing Hub. We really relied on them this year to bring mindfulness to not only our ASU community, but to a worldwide community. We'll talk about this more in depth in a moment, but normally our center has a conference every year, and we were scheduled to have our conference in March of 2020. And of course that was canceled due to the pandemic. So UTO and the Marketing Hub helped us. We really engaged with all of you to be able to bring mindfulness to not only our ASU community, but to open it up on the ASU YouTube channel to people from, we found out, literally all over the world. You know, normally our conference is capped at 200 people, and so, you know, that's, and we might touch about 7,000 to 8,000 lives a year. This year, we were at more than 84,000 lives touched, and over 94 countries in the world engaged with us over the YouTube channel. So we brought Midday Mindfulness, and Nika will talk about this in a moment, but brought Midday Mindfulness to our community. This was a 12 to 1 o'clock, almost daily meditation and mindfulness workshop. And we really focused on emerging and relevant topics, all of those topics that you can see there. And we moved from talking about only the pandemic to really thinking more broadly about health justice and calls for social justice, and also how do people transition from the early days of the pandemic over the long summer that was last summer and into the fall. How do we work with flexibility and uncertainty? And also understanding that sometimes Bringing some fun and laughter and levity into our lives is also very, very important, and a way to build our community. So this was Midday Mindfulness. All of the sessions are archived. So if you feel like you've missed out, don't worry at all. We have over, I think, 250 sessions that we have archived, and they're all for you. They're free. At your leisure, you can tap into these. During this time, we really engaged with our internal ASU audience. We had collaborations from, I think, every academic unit and many of the operational units as well, and for which we're really grateful. And sort of moving forward, one of the things that we would really appreciate is your thoughts as you do the SOAR analysis on how do we take these ideas of equity and mindfulness and work-life integration into the next phase of our social happenings, that in a way that's relevant and that can reach as many people as possible, and is also revenue neutral or revenue generating, because we are a revenue generating center, that we rely on revenue to be alive and vibrant. So with that, I think that I'll pass it back over to Nika. And Nika, I think I've talked about some that you were going to talk about, so I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. We're running on time anyway. So I'm just going to plug in those YouTube sessions that Teri was talking about into the chat, as well as our Midday Mindfulness Caring and Connection Initiative website. So there's an abundance of resources that is at your disposal for free, that is shareable, linkable, and I'll plug those in.
So we would love to have your questions and anything else, the insights that you have. We tried to stay at 15 minutes. We're a little over, so we'll turn it back over to the moderator.
Thanks, folks. And Nika put some information in the chat there, some links there. And this session is also being recorded. So if you'd like to revisit anything here, this will be posted at a future date with all of the other sessions from Empower. So I asked at the start, and we discussed during the launch this morning, to think about the strengths, the opportunities, the aspirations, and the results. So when you're thinking about mindfulness and mindfulness in the ASU environment, how we've already instituted a number of behaviors and activities and what we can do in the future, what are some things, and feel free to unmute or to use chat, what are some things that you think are strengths here? For example, what is the greatest strength or passion or pursuit of instituting mindfulness behaviors and specific intentional mindfulness at ASU?
I have one input. I think, to me, mindfulness is to be real. It's to put yourself in other person's situation as well and be realistic. And for work, I think employees' responsibility is to be responsible. And no, it's not about them only. It's a two-way, and same thing goes for the employer. But I believe employers mostly are mindful to retain their good employees. As you know, a lot of people are switching and shifting between companies. So if a company is not mindful, if you're not providing a positive work environment, then at that point, at least employees would be looking. An employee that is looking outside is less connected, and that's less productive. So I believe by being mindful from both sides, employee and employer, you're going to have a much better work relationship, that an employee chooses to work at that institute or company, and the company chooses to have that employee. It's not a force. But I believe mindfulness is extremely important in every situation, in just your everyday life. Be mindful of how you're treating others. Be mindful of how you conduct, how you choose words. But I think in corporations, it's mostly to create a positive, longevity work environment with good employees.
Thanks, Shaheen. Appreciate it. Other thoughts? Thank you for those in the chat as well. I'm capturing this data as we share it, and it's kind of an info gathering here, so nothing is right or wrong. Just feel free to share. We'll continue to talk about strengths a little bit, and think about what assets and strengths will we preserve and build on? Yes, I think that, go ahead.
Sorry, I'll just chime in. We didn't really mention this, but one of the things that we're quite proud of in the last 4 years, the center is only 4 years old. And in the last 4 years, we've really gained some national and international recognition. We're going to be presenting at mindful.org later this month, and at Mayo Clinic in Rochester in July, and working with other centers around the country. So we're building a reputation for the scholarly approach, and also to the equitable approach that we've been using. So I do, from our perspective, I think that is a big strength. And I failed to mention that as we presented.
That's great. And I acknowledge the respectfulness piece in the chat, and respecting other people's perspectives on capturing that data. That's great. Thank you. That's a lot of strengths, and I see a lot of recognition of that from this group. So let's maybe talk about some opportunities, and what are the opportunities that we see, maybe that you can think of, that exist in your area that you work, to increase awareness of mindfulness or promote better behaviors? What opportunities do you see exist? And maybe think of the scope as what's my locus of control? The folks that I work with, how can I help them? And what opportunities exist there for us to help them to be more aware of mindfulness practices, and to institute that into their daily behaviors. Let's see some great comments in the chats, folks. File along. Being a role model is a great one. Chris, you're right about Zoom sessions. It really is easy for us to listen with one ear to what folks are saying, and focus on 2 or 3 other things. And that's a little bit of the opposite of mindfulness. So that's certainly an opportunity for improvement there. Maybe Nika or Teri, while people are adding stuff into the chat, can you share some examples of your evolution from going from being maybe less mindful to more mindful, and helping others to evolve there? What are some things that you had to do, or changes that you had to make? What were opportunities that you recognized in the past that we might be able to empathize with?
So many learning points, and please hear this in just the best way. We talk about being real models instead of role models, because we are not perfect at this, and life presents us each with opportunities every single day, Nika and myself included. I think, my background is a clinician. I'm a nurse, and early on, it was really the whole motive for me to be interested in mindfulness was about how to be focused and present with a patient or a family member, given the distracted, loud, busy environment that is healthcare. And so, again, just bringing reality into this idea of mindfulness, and learning that every encounter, every meeting, and when I say meeting, I don't just mean, work meetings, I mean every encounter that you have with someone or with yourself is an opportunity to practice being present, really full on present. And so even everyday things like washing your dishes or brushing your teeth can become an opportunity to just be present and let everything else sort of recede and go by the wayside for the moment. It doesn't mean that you put everything on hold forever. It just means that you're present in that moment. So I'd love to hear Nika's answer to this question.
So some opportunities that were, personally for myself, when I was learning more about mindfulness, I was also teaching it at the same time. And to me, that was, something that we say a lot is real model versus role model. And it really allowed people, I think, to see that you don't need to be perfect at mindfulness or meditation, which I'm certainly not. And I think that it allowed people to kind of have a more realistic sense of how to incorporate mindfulness into your life on your own terms for you as a unique individual.
That's excellent. Thank you. We're getting short on time, and we have a couple of other sections that I'd like people to think about and maybe capture some data around. if we can. The next one is aspirations. And I think we've talked about the aspirations a little bit through the presentation. What are some other aspirations that everyone in this session sees with in increasing mindfulness in our organization? What can we do? What can we impact? What are thoughts that I'd love to see by increasing mindfulness in my organization? X. I love that. Add mindfulness to all or most activities. That's great. And I think peak performance, Chris, and managing balance. That's great. All right, we've got one more moment. And what are some? How can we measure this? We talk about results. How do we measure this? How do we know we're successful? That's the question. How do we know when we've won? I'll just share personally, I think this is going to happen forever, right? Mindfulness is, we're always winning if we're practicing mindfulness, but are there some things that you guys can think of that might be indicators of us being successful in instituting mindfulness?
I'll just throw out that we really believe that narratives are important. So quantitative data is always relevant, but narratives and stories are just as relevant of people's experiences. So I'll just throw that out there.